Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. One of the things in that very long overview of my long career that you didn't mention is my work with the Corporate Startup Lab. I'm assuming that most of you know what that is, but just in case you haven't, it's an initiative that's part of the Schwartz Center that focuses on bringing entrepreneurial innovation and the spirit of it into larger corporations. So making them more agile, making them more nimble. What can we teach them about innovation and what does that look like? I teach the Capstone course for that with Sean Amorati, who's the one who founded the program. And it's an amazing opportunity because it's the best of both worlds of large company, but the entrepreneurial spirit and innovation for it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. One of the tools that we use as part of that program is called Pitching Innovation to the C-Suite, and it's all about how we communicate and convey our ideas about innovation and new products. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, this is sort of an overview of the CSL process. There's plenty of tools online at the website. If you haven't been there to check it out, they can help you through all of these stages. Obviously, we start with project framing. We talk about what's your idea? How do you say it in a paragraph or two? Tools to help you build the business. From there, we go into MAPS, which if you don't know Sean's version of that, it's minimally awesome products as opposed to an MIP. Customer discovery, validation, and then pitching innovation to the C-suite, the final piece of the pie here for this one. So one of the things that I always tell anyone, and this is true whether you're an entrepreneur or a corporate intrapreneur or corporate entrepreneur, is that you should always be prepared and know what questions you're going to ask. From years of doing investor relations calls, earnings calls, Wall Street presentations, I can tell you that the biggest place for success and failure can happen in the Q&A portion of any presentation. So whether that's you put all this time, all this energy, all this work into it, and then get flustered in the Q&A section, weren't prepared for the question, don't have an answer for it, that's where things can really go sideways. And that's true whether you're a traditional entrepreneur or a corporate one. So one of the things that we talk about with this tool is really preparing yourself for these types of presentations and having the right tools to make sure that you're prepared for those questions that you're going to get. And it really doesn't matter if it's a VC or you're presenting into a corporate executive board. But what we do know from talking to corporate entrepreneurs and traditional entrepreneurs is that's the place where everyone has the most angst, they have the most panic, and they're the least prepared for that portion of the presentation. And the reason why is most entrepreneurs come in with a base knowledge in a particular area or particular function. What happens when you're put into a VC meeting or a corporate executive team, you're put in a position where you have to answer questions on all aspects of the business. It's no longer okay that you're an engineer or you're marketing. You're representing the entire process. So you need to be prepared for the questions that go with that. So this is one of the tools that we've created to help get through that part of the meeting, that part of the pitch, and help you feel more comfortable, more prepared with it. So from a corporate perspective, one of the things that we talk about are what are some of the biggest communications challenges we face? First and foremost, defending ideas in the early stages. One of the differences of being a corporate entrepreneur is there is definitely a broader flashlight on you in those early stages. And what I mean by that is innovation is exciting, people are interested in it, but they're also wanting to know all the answers on day one. So that ability to communicate your idea, communicate the story, and be prepared for the questions is even actually more critical in a corporate setting than it is in an entrepreneurial setting. There's also in a corporate setting a lower tolerance for error, and it kind of links to that first idea because in the corporate setting, you have lots of experts in the room. You're not presenting to one or two or three people. Chances are you're presenting your idea to 8, 9, 10 people, maybe some type of board within the company to do it. And so you've got functional expertise in the room with you across all aspects of the business. So being prepared for the questions, thinking about those is going to be really critical, because there's a lot less room for error in the corporate setting, because if it happens with a VC, you can say, oh, it's a bad meeting. I can take this learning, move forward with it, and do it and do better for my next time. In a corporate setting, you don't have that option. There's one team that you're presenting to. It's probably a handful of executives. So it's important to get these early stages right and understand the best ways to communicate them. Thirdly, more breadth is required. Again, I think I've already said this a little bit, but corporate entrepreneurs are forced early on to answer questions from a really broad group of people within the company and probably outside of your area of expertise. So that can be a challenge. Let's get into that a little more. So one of the tools that we have, and I'll walk you through this, is something called the C-Suite Canvas. Like all things, it's a tool, it's meant to be helpful, but it's only as good as the information you put into it and the way you customize it. So thinking about it from the C-suite perspective or the VC suite perspective, it's important that you try and create something that gives you a shorthand look at what is your progress, what's your idea, what's your progress, do I have any gaps in my plan, what issues am I going to face on the horizon that I know that I need to be prepared to address. And it also helps you understand who you're speaking with, because guess what? Whether it's a VC or corporate, you're going to have friends and foes in the audience. So you have to be prepared for some really tough questions, because not everyone may be on your side. So these are the 6 areas that we focused on the Canvas. And again, this works both traditional entrepreneur or in a corporate setting, but we have the CEO, the CMO, CLO, CTO, CFO, and the COO. That's a lot of O's and C's. But what are their agendas? What perspective are they bringing to your pitch? What do they want to know about? What's going to drive their dialogue with you? So this is a quick look at the Canvas, and I know that it's hard to see. I'm not going to, well, I can't move, so I'm not going to read those off to you because I can't see them very well. But what we've done here is started with each one of those and come up with a list of 5 or 6 basic questions. So with each of those, we have the opportunity to say, okay, there's a pretty standard set of questions that we all get asked. Let's start with the basics. Let's understand what legal may be asking versus what the operating officer may be asking, versus the CMO might be asking. So we give you a sort of a cheat sheet and a place to start with that and a list of some questions. But the beauty with this is really taking it, customizing it, and anticipating what the questions may be. Sorry about that. I'll give you a second to take a look at it, look at some of the questions. I find that when we do this, we could fill the boxes tenfold with the questions we can come up with. And what we try and do is keep a running list of all of the questions that may come up and what those answers may be. Now, guess what? You're going to get questions you don't have the answer to, but half the beauty of all of this is being prepared for the question. So you can say then, well, we don't have that answer today, but here's the path to get there, or here's where it falls in what we have to solve for in moving forward. So I encourage you to check this document out, keep it handy, come up with your own list of questions, and really use it as a guide to help prepare for big meetings, big pitches that you do for it. These are just the instructions that go along with the form that give you a little bit more background on it, but I think you get the idea of the typical executives, what that looks like, and how we feel about that. Reason why I wanted to talk about the C-Suite Canvas today is because I wanted to talk about the importance of identifying the audience, knowing who your key stakeholders are, trying to anticipate their expectations, really understanding the positives and the negatives about your product and your approach, understand that they're looking for risks as well. One of the big things that we teach in giving presentations, and I see it all the time, is people are so excited about their idea that they're giving the best, the most favorable view of it. The average person you're presenting to doesn't want your sales pitch. They want to know that you understand the risks and rewards of the product and the business. And they really want to understand that you're able to have a clear, concise, but honest view of what you're working with. So it's important to understand that. And it's important to share that information too. With the CC Canvas, it's encouraged that you can customize it, add your own questions to it. I use it like a cheat sheet of things that I think I might get asked. But use it to your advantage, come up with questions of your own, and really think about it from there. That's the quick intro on the tool. I guess the other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about today too was, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, was communication in general and communicating your idea. My background comes from both startup and corporate. I can tell you from a corporate perspective, doing investor calls, earnings calls, board director presentations, communication is critical in those environments. Understanding what you're presenting, understanding what questions you may get asked. One of the things that I always try and do with any presentation that I'm giving is actually really pre-sell it. So take it and share it with the people one-on-one before I get a room of people together to talk about it and see what they say, see what questions they have, kind of get a feel for who I'm speaking with. So whenever possible, create that opportunity, ask them, hey, I'm going to send you the presentation in advance. Hey, do you have 15 minutes to talk about it? In 15 minutes, you can get what their top questions are going to be, what they're interested in. And guess what? You're also going to get a little buy-in along the way. So it's really important in building relationships to be able to do that. So I strongly encourage you to have your presentations done early so that you have time to come up with Q&A. I also encourage you to pre-sell your presentations and your idea so we can really troubleshoot and see if there are gaps in your presentation, things you haven't thought of, and being prepared for that. So really important part of selling your idea and presenting your idea. What I'd like to do now is just see if there's any questions from anybody. I know I went through that kind of quick, and I think there's a lot of aspects of communication that we could certainly get into. So questions, thoughts, ideas, anyone want to share a case or an example where they actually gave a presentation and got stumped by a question or struggled with the issues that we're talking about today? Do we have any questions? Hi, Jody, I see you there. Do you have a question?
I don't, Melissa.
She's traveling. I'm surprised she's there.
Yes,
Hey
I am
there.
traveling, but I wanted to, it was like a session I was really interested in, so I'm really happy to have joined.
Thank you for joining us.
Definitely.
Any questions you have about communicating and anything you think I missed?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the hardest thing is knowing who you're going to pitch to, right? Like in advance. And I think preparing for that is probably the biggest, like one of the biggest challenges. Like if I know these are 4 people that'll be in the audience, I can look them up, I can research them a little bit, but most of the time we don't know. So like, how do we guess, I guess is kind of one, like I'm going to do that today here at this like pitch fest. Like I have no idea who the judges are, but like, so.
Yeah. And that's a problem in a corporate setting. You should have an idea who some of the folks are. And I can tell you from my corporate presentations and pitches that a lot of the people in the room have been with the company for a very long time. They have very firm opinions about what they believe, about the way operations should work, about what's profitable, about what works in the marketplace. Whether it's true or not, they definitely have their beliefs. So the faster you can understand their perspective, the better you can make your presentation. Because the worst thing that can happen is you're 10 or 15 minutes into it and it's derailed because someone asks you a question you can't answer, you get flustered, and it just goes downhill from there. So we're not always going to know who we're presenting to. In the corporate setting, you should be better prepared for that, and you will have tougher questions to probably answer. In the VC setting, you may not have that, but you probably know someone who's pitched an idea to them in the past, or you may be able to meet them informally and ask her some questions so that when you're in these big, really important milestone presentations, you're really prepared for what's coming at you. Jody, what did you do to prepare for today then, if you're pitching?
That's a good question. We found no information online about the audience. So we looked at some of the past, people who have pitched and kind of won the competition to see. I mean, you don't get to really see what their pitch looked like in retrospect, but at least you can see what the company is. And I mean, we're just going to give it our best shot, right? We have 3 minutes. There's like 30 something companies presenting. So, with just 3 minutes, you want to just kind of leave them with enough information, right? To be asking some good questions. And you're right, there's like a 2-minute Q&A afterwards. And that's the one that we want to make sure we're super sharp on.
Yeah, especially in that situation where it's such a quick interaction and quick interchange. You do not want to look like a deer in the headlights in that Q&A section and get just side railed by a question. And it happens all the time. And even those of us that prepare a ton for it, it can still happen. But it really can make a difference when you're looking at that 3-minute pitch with a 2-minute Q&A. I mean, that's pretty intense. You definitely want to be prepared for the questions and ready for them, because there's there's an expected pace for the meeting that people, want to see. And if they see you stutter or hesitate, they know they've got you and know that you're not as confident or as versed on what you're presenting as you think you are. Thanks, Jody.
Yep. Thanks, Melissa.
Are there any other questions out there today? Anybody in the room? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know C-suite usually really busy. How long do these presentations usually, how long are they? And then also what really makes one stand out?
So how long is a really good question, because sometimes it could be a board of directors meeting and you're told you have 15 minutes, but they're really interested and it turns into an hour meeting with Q&A for it. Sometimes it can be 15 minutes. It can also be, you're part of an all day long board meeting. So you're factored into the agenda. You're probably given maybe 30 minutes. You might have a full hour with an executive to talk about it. I always think it's probably at least be ready for an hour. But what I always did was I kept a short presentation and a long presentation, because as soon as I would walk in the room, I might know that I have an hour, but I can feel the room and I know I do not have an hour. And when I do that, I switch to my short version. So I know that I'm hitting what I want to communicate, what I want to get out there. And it's probably the first 5 slides of your long deck that you were going to give. I'm a big believer too in the presentation of having really good a summary slide or an idea slide, because when you get into this Q&A discussion, you're always left with one slide up on the screen. So make it be your best slide, your most important slide, or something that makes you feel comfortable to refer back to on it. That can be a really good tool as well. But the time, that's a hard question, because I've seen it short and brief, and I've seen them. And sometimes it does depend on how the Q&A is going. If the Q&A is going well, it might be quick. If the Q&A is not going well, they sense a gap or a weakness, and then they keep going at it and at it and at it. When I worked for Starkist, who went through different company owners, most recently they were purchased by a Korean company. And it was really fascinating because the Korean management team had a completely different expectation of the executive team than the American counterparts did. The American counterparts wanted us to know our area, know our place. The Korean management team really looked at us as we were all executives, we were all leaders. We should be versed on everything. So they would ask the HR person a question about operations, or they would ask the marketing person about something going on in one of the plants or the facilities with that. So I kind of lump that all together because it's about being prepared for the conversation that you're going to have. And knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. Sometimes you're going to get tough questions and you're definitely not going to have the answers to everything, but it's about not looking like a deer in the headlights, but saying, you know what, that's a good question. We've thought about that. I have some ideas. Can I run them past you offline? Get that conversation somewhere else. It's a hard one to have in a room with 10 or 12 people or even 5 people. So what you can do on those times is try and redirect the conversation a little bit, particularly if you think it's going to be semi-hostile or aggressive in nature for it. What was your other question? It was time, and what was the other part?
What really stands out in the presentation? Is you having like 5 minutes or 15 minutes? Like, is it the first few slides that gets the C-suite like, wow, I want that, or what is it? How do you know this?
It's definitely the first few slides for sure. What I find is in a lot of the presentations, we'll do presentations that are 30, 40, 50 slides. There's no way you can cover that in an hour. You can cover maybe 15 slides in an hour if you're lucky with it. So it's having really well designed slides that answer the questions before they ask them. We had a CEO that we used to work with, which was honestly, he was terrible for us in meetings because he would stop, you're 10 minutes into it and start asking questions and completely side rail the whole presentation for it. That became really challenging to work with. So we started to learn his methodology about it. And so we would prepare, what questions are we know he's going to ask us? How do we incorporate that in the first few slides so it doesn't feel, honestly, sometimes like a firing squad of questions, and try and answer some before they're even asked, because that's when you get people starting to shake their heads of, yeah, good point, good question on it. And I think what helps those first couple slides, I feel really strongly at the beginning and the end of the presentation that there's one slide that's sort of your, let's rest on this slide. If we're going to get questions or people are going to be kind of from the first slide really asking lots of questions, something that can be up that says the whole story that you're trying to accomplish. So it has to be designed well, it has to be concise, it has to be something that you're comfortable always referring back to. But I think having those parking slides are really important in the presentation. And as a speaker, they actually make me more comfortable because I can always say, oh yeah, right here, I can refer to it. And it makes me a little more relaxed and a little bit more comfortable in case I'm 5 minutes in and I'm getting tons of questions that I may or may not have been ready for, hopefully. But yeah, I put energy into those first and last slides. For the Corporate Startup Lab Capstone, we have the students do presentations to their clients for that. And that's one of the big things that come out of it. They're in such a rush to get to the presentation, like to get the presentation done, that they don't think about the people in the room, what questions they're going to ask, and how much time do they really have. We end up taking their presentations and cutting them in half and helping them build a few key slides, again, that you can go back to on it, because it was taking them too long to tell the story. And that's one thing you'll find. I mean, that's a good thing with Jody's example of 3 minutes to tell your story, 2 minutes for Q&A. Getting to the point fast enough. Yes, you've done so much homework. You have so much information that validates your idea. But if it takes you 15 or 20 slides to get to your idea, you didn't set it up right. So it's, here's the idea, and then here's the backup for it with it. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Other questions in the room or online? Your quiet group today. I know we went kind of quick. Normally with this session, we've done it in the past, we've had lots of questions and lots of answers. So it's gone actually over. So any questions? Anybody? Allison? Anyone in the room? All right. Well, I teach marketing classes, the new products classes, the corporate capstone. I love presenting. I love helping people with their presentations. Hope to see you in a class. Or shoot me an email and ask me if you have questions that you weren't comfortable asking in this environment or something that's really specific, because I would love to help. So thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.